Okay.
Okay. All right, we are live.
That sounds good.
I'm good to go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the September 6th special council meeting of the Village of Lytton. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone to turn off their video, to mute their microphones, and to allow council to begin their proceedings. Just to let you know, we are all being recorded and broadcasted on the Village of Lytton YouTube channel. If anyone is looking for a video recording of the meeting or a past meeting, you can go to the Village YouTube channel and watch it there live. Thank you, Mayor O'Connor, and you may call the meeting to order.
Thank you. So I call this meeting to order at 1:03 p.m. The Village of Lytton recognizes that we live on the traditional unceded territory of the Ntlaka'kan people. This afternoon, I'm here at the Parish Hall with Councillors McCann, Lightfoot, and Michelle, as well as Mike Glaschuk, who's here in the capacity of Deputy Corporate Officer in accordance with our council procedure bylaw. We also have Councillor Toss joining us via Zoom. So we'll start by adopting this afternoon's agenda. So can I please have the motion made?
I'll move that council adopt the agenda for the special council meeting held on September 6th as presented.
And seconder? Sure. Thank you, Councillor McCann. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Carried. So now we move on to item number 4, which is our public comment. I'm going to turn it back over to Corporate Officer Story.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of the public are now invited to comment on matters related to the agenda. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. You can find that by clicking on the reactions at the bottom of your screen and clicking raise hand. When it's your turn, I'll read your name and we will ask you to unmute yourself. You will get a pop-up screen asking you to unmute and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Please remember to state your name, address, and the agenda item that you are referring to. If anyone would like to speak, please now hit the raise hand function.
We have somebody here who would like to speak.
Perfect. I believe that is Ernie Wagner, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Wagner, go ahead and speak.
If you want to come and stand just right here, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm up 1324 County Road, and I just want to comment that this is a positive indication that building is going to start. We've got a cement plant coming in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? And for a second time, is there anyone else that would like to speak? And for a last time, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Thank you. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 5, which is a presentation we have from Corey Gain, our Director of Development. So Corey, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We're here to present temporary use permit 2023-001 for property located at 1120 North Trans-Canada Highway for your consideration. Pardon me. It is to allow operation of a concrete batch plant and for a 3-year term. So this is the first of applications that we have presented to you. So I thought it might be useful for yourselves and the public to see the notice of public input that was placed on both in the newspaper and on the Village of Lytton website, as well as the public notification that was sent to all property owners within the village limits, just to get an idea of what happened a little bit before we considered this. So the permit was advertised August 23rd and 30th in the Lillooet News. And the regular post went out to property owners late in August. So here we are, the subject property. The subject property is located at the north end of the village of Lytton. It changed ownership in May of 2023. It's currently zoned CRM, comprehensive mixed use, and R2 multi-family residential. Neither of these zones include concrete batch plants as a permitted use. The applicant is therefore requesting council approve a temporary use permit to allow the use. The application requests permission to operate the batch plant for a 3-year term. It's anticipated the concrete batch plant will use approximately 2 acres of the site. Hours of operation will be between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m., 3 or 4 days a week. The permit itself allows those days to be anywhere from Monday through Saturday, but not Sunday. All components of the operation are portable and will be removed from the site at the end of the temporary use permit term. So again, here we have the subject property. You see a recent print from Google, as well as the site plan that was submitted with the application. So the property is accessed from what is identified as Main Street, here shown as the yellow line. We noticed that on Google Maps, it's also been referred to as Airport Way. I'm not sure what the history there is, but the Main Street is registered untitled by way of a statutory right-of-way. The Village of Lytton also registered a covenant on title of the subject property to secure the location and use of the existing airstrip. According to the covenant text, no portion of the land shall be used for any purpose except an aircraft runway. The project as proposed can therefore not move forward unless the covenant is removed from title or council decides that they do not want to enforce that covenant. The applicant has advised the airstrip is no longer in use, and council may direct staff, therefore, to discharge the covenant documents so that this is taken care of coincident with consideration of the temporary use permit. Approval of an access permit by the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure will be required. And while driveway access to the concrete operations will encroach on the neighboring property, both properties are owned by the same company, Cumsheen Enterprises. Therefore, staff is not concerned about the location of the driveway. However, council does have the option of requiring an easement agreement to be registered to secure that access if there is some concern. So the only property currently zoned M2 heavy industrial zone, the zone that allows concrete batch plants as a permitted use, is the Aspen Planers Mill, located at the southern end of the village. Of course, it's currently being used for other purposes. So establishing a concrete batch plant on the subject property as a temporary use will support the rebuilding and associated repairs to Highway 1. Council may include terms and conditions in the temporary use permit to address the impacts that might arise from the proposed use and to provide some flexibility on the days the plant may operate. The draft permit, as I mentioned, allows operations from Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. No operations would be permitted on Sunday, and this seems to be consistent with other batch plants operating in other communities throughout the province. So these operating hours are also consistent with similar operations in other communities. So the recommendation before you today is that council approve the temporary use permit and that staff prepare a discharge, or that council directs staff to prepare a discharge documents to remove the covenant from the title. Obviously, council can discuss whether that is something they want to do. The reason that the covenant is there for the airstrip is unfortunately not known to us, but perhaps some of you will have more history on that, and you may determine whether there is some future use for that or not. I have with me today Jack Pawsey, who's part of our planning team. So probably the first time that you may have seen him. He's been processing the application and he's available here to answer any questions that you might have. I'm not aware of the applicant being present, though they were invited to the meeting as well. As I understand it, there's been no correspondence received to the public hearing web address that was provided in the public notification. So I think that concludes my comments, Council. As I said, we'll be available here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Just before we put the recommended motion forward, I just wondering, Shannon, if you would, I'll turn it back to you for to ask for public comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I did want to just agree with Planner Gain that that is correct. We have not received any correspondence on this matter from the public. At this time, I do want to reach out to see if anyone does want to speak to this subject matter. Persons wishing to speak to the temporary use permit are asked to provide their name and address. There will be 3 calls for speakers. Speakers will be limited to 5 minutes per call to a maximum of 3 calls or 15 minutes max. After all speakers have had an opportunity to speak, a person may speak a second time. And after all speakers have had an opportunity to speak a second time, a person may speak for a third time. Village staff and or the owner applicant may provide clarification or respond to questions at the request of the chair, but a speaker will not debate a point of view with another speaker. And those in attendance, just as a reminder, must follow the rules of conduct as set out in the most recent version of the council procedure bylaw. I'm going to ask if there is anyone in the room or online that would like to speak to the temporary use permit. First call. Second call, is there anyone online or in the room that would like to speak to the temporary use permit? And third call, is there anyone in person or online that would like to speak to the temporary use permit? Not hearing any, I will pass it back to you, Mayor O'Connor.
Thank you. And now I'm just going to put it out to council. Is there anyone who has any comments or questions for Corey or her team? Councillor Lightfoot.
I'm just wondering, Corey, if you could expand on the covenant. You said you're suggesting that it could be removed, but you also stated that, or our council could decide not to enforce the covenant. And if that was the case, what are the downsides to taking that approach?
Right. Essentially, it appears that the village of Lytton covenanted with themselves. I'm not sure if perhaps they owned the property in the past to protect the runway. But if it is not something that needs to be protected any longer, the cleanest way to deal with it would be to discharge that covenant. However, if there is some thought that it might be useful in the future, there is perhaps the opportunity for council to make the decision that as a temporary use, this might be allowed without discharge. I'm not sure of the legal ramifications. It's not quite as tidy. So certainly that is an option. As a temporary use, it will expire and the property would be able to revert back. But we felt the cleanest way was to discharge it.
Just to quickly add to that, council, if you don't mind, just there's a wording in the covenant that says no portion of the land shall be used for any purpose except as an aircraft runway. So that was kind of the sentence that stood out to us, which is why you recommended discharge may be the best option.
Right. If I can just follow through, digging deep into my files last night, I happened to come across a letter from N.D. Lee, received from the village in 2006, and it says this letter provides the information that we promised to give you before the public hearing. This was a previous owner. The airstrip, according to Transport Canada, the airstrip is not certified. And I do believe it was in the early 80s that Transport Canada deregulated the number of airstrips. As such, the fact that the proposed road both crosses the runway and runs parallel to it in close proximity is not significant at this time. The airstrip can be used as a private airport with the proposed road configuration, as there are no regulations governing a private airport. However, if the airport were ever to be used for scheduled flights or medevac flights, it would first have to be certified by Transport Canada. Given the road configuration, the airstrip would not meet Transport Canada's certification requirements. So I do know at the time, before that was originally sold, there was a lobby to have a medical center there. I do know from previous people that were interested in the properties, the potential of a private airstrip was attractive. And so I'm just concerned that once it's gone, it would never be able to be reinstated. I'm not sure whether it's relevant or not. I'll listen to my fellow councillors to see how important they think it is, but I would hate to see that a future possibility is negated by us removing the covenant.
Thank you for that history, Councillor Lightfoot. Unfortunately, yeah, this is one of the challenges of not having historical records to go back to and being away from the situation. We're not quite sure what the history is. We appreciate hearing it. It sounded to me from what you said that it would be difficult, given the circumstances that exist now, for the airport to be certified to be used other than as a private airport. So I'm not sure what the benefit might be. But as you say, I leave it to council for further discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Toss?
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. Following up on Councillor Lightfoot, in terms of it being available as an emergency landing, is that still feasible without, like, obviously if there's a plane in distress, they're not going to be so concerned that the airport's certified by Transport Canada. So without that certification, is there still like the ability to land there in an emergency? And does the potential concrete plant negate that? Like, would it be out of the runway range? Like, I see that it's kind of at the end, but would a plane still be able to land?
I'm not sure who can answer that question.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that we can answer that question. I think that it appears to be well away, but not being an expert in runways, it was a large number of years ago that I worked for Transport Canada, and I know when a plane needs to land, it'll land wherever it has to land. But in terms of officially, I don't know.
May I have a follow-up question on the cost of removing the covenant? Is there a cost involved? I saw in the actual putting on of the covenant, there was a $53 charge, which is negligible. Is there any fees involved with removing it?
Yes, there would be fees for the land title office. So the mayor and clerk or city clerk or corporate officer in this case would need to sign the documents, and then it would go to land title's office for to be deposited and registered to remove the covenant from title. So it would not be a very significant cost.
Sure. Okay, so it would be negligible. In that same vein, would it be possible at the end of the 3-year temporary use permit to replace the covenant, since it is a negligible cost?
Only if it was approved by the current property owner.
Ah, okay. That's key.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor McCann?
So when I was listening, it sounded to me like we had two options. One is to remove the covenant completely right now, or to temporarily remove the covenant. Is that correct?
that I think there are probably three options now if we introduce the concept of temporary removal. I think I will have to request some assistance from Shannon on this aspect, but it seems to me once the covenant is removed, unless you have cooperation of the property owner, it's probably not a good idea to flip-flop back and forth. I would suggest we simply stay the course and the Village of Lytton doesn't or chooses not to enforce or, push the matter, if you will, to stay silent. Shannon, do you feel that that is a possibility?
I agree what Ms. Gain is saying. Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to do anything other than the recommendation from a legal basis.
So just so I understand it, if we decide not to remove the covenant, then this project would not be able to go ahead. Is that correct? Then the temporary use permit would not be able to go ahead?
Not if the Village of Lytton wanted to enforce the terms of that covenant. Right? So you'd have to make the decision that you're not going to enforce the terms of the covenant because the covenant document was an agreement that the village registered between itself and itself. It's a kind of an odd situation. It wasn't an agreement with the property owner. It was something it appears the village did in the past.
Yes, the village owned the property in the past.
And so the covenant stayed on with the owner after that.
Yeah.
Correct?
CAO Mombriket, did you have your hand up or no?
I did. Thank you very much, Mayor O'Connor. I just wanted to clarify, just because there's a covenant on the property for an airstrip doesn't mean the owner is obliged to operate an airstrip. It just means the airstrip stays there, but they don't need, whoever owns the property has the right to decide whether or not an airplane ever lands on that property. So there's not really certainty that it would be used by leaving it there. If that's kind of one of the considerations.
Okay. Councillor Toss.
Thank you. A few quick minor questions just out of curiosity. Why would we enforce closure and work hours when the operation would be significantly away from residences and it would restrict them to like a 4 o'clock closing time and no Sundays? What is the rationale for that?
Can speak to that. I have lived somewhere in the past where a similar type of operation created a significant amount of angst in the community for operating outside of its hours. My thinking was if we put the operating hours into the temporary use permit, then everybody understands at least where we're starting from. That doesn't mean we can't make an agreement to do something to change it. That doesn't mean we can't, do that at a later date. Maybe we even specify in the temporary use permit that those are the hours or subject to changes approved by the village or something like that, so that if we can kind of see that there has been no impact. Some of these operations can have a pretty broad impact, not necessarily just adjacent properties. And so, once it's operating, we have a better sense of that. It would allow us, potentially to approve additional operating, because I know what you mean. Once things are going, we're going to want them moving, and we don't necessarily want to go, oh, sorry, the plant's closed, right? So if that's in everybody's interest at that time, it would be nice to have a mechanism to be able to approve that.
Has the proponent been advised of that, and do they have issue with that? Are they planning to work within those hours without any, that's not a problem? Do you think, or do we know?
Yes, Councillor Toss, Jack contacted the party who will be operating the concrete batch plant in agreement with the Comsheen Enterprises, and they identified that they would be operating 3 to 4 days a week from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Then once that topic was identified, then I did a little bit of research, and we found that this is in fact hours that are consistent with other places. And I think because, your concrete's got a set and whatnot, they start early and they end not too late. So again, because we didn't want to specify specific 3 or 4 days of the week, we said, okay, anytime between Monday and Saturday would seem to protect the interests of the community in the absence of any other guiding principles, if you will. This is a good place to start.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Lightfoot.
I have a question for Corey. I didn't hear your total remarks regarding access. I do understand that Ministry of Transportation has a gravel pit, I guess on the east side of the property. And I believe they travel through that property to access it. Is that what you were referring to? My notes that I did take said that something about we could register right of way, or we could establish terms and conditions. Could you just expand on that portion of your report again, please?
Sure. Okay, so access to the site is by a road that is registered by statutory right-of-way. It's called Main Street on the mapping, and it passes over the property immediately to the west. So there is a property, a triangular shaped property between the highway and the subject property that the statutory right-of-way runs across, and it pre-exists, and we believe that it is sufficient. But if you were concerned that you wanted more specific approval or confirmation of the continuing ability to use Main Street to access the site, that is also an option available to you. We don't think that it is too large of an issue at this point, but it is out there, so we wanted to address it.
That sounds like it's perhaps something different than what I was thinking of. But in your experience, if the ministry has a gravel pit and has regularly used access through the airport property, would that be maintained? Is that something the ministry would be concerned about, or could we assume that it will just continue as has been used?
I believe we can assume that it will continue as it's been used.
Thank you. Councillor Toss.
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. Yeah, I'm not on mute. Great. 2 more questions. One, at the end of the temporary use permit, it states that that there will be steps taken to ensure site is cleaned when work is completed, and that after 3 years, that it'll be returned back to its original state. What are the checks and balances on that? So do we have like a bond, or are we going to just address that 6 months before the end of the term, or do we just trust the proponent?
Mayor, through you to council, there are options. I would suspect that because the Local Government Act allows a temporary use permit to be issued for a 3-year term and renewed for a second 3-year term, that likely anticipating the kind of construction activity that's going to occur, that is what we'll see at the end of or prior to the end of the 3-year term, is renewal of the permit. At the end of the 6 years, then the property owner will have the option to apply to rezone the property to M2, which would allow the use, or to discontinue the operation. If they discontinue the operation, the provincial regulations regarding operation of a concrete batch plant and contaminated sites, all those other layers of authority at the provincial level will take over and ensure that the site is returned to a suitable state. Now, because we're not expecting the ground to be disturbed in any way, because this is a temporary operation, we're not anticipating that there would be any difficulty. And certainly, as I say, there is provincial overview of these types of activities. So we have a little bit of a buffer there. We don't want to, we haven't recommended at this point that we go any further than that, though certainly performance security is something that some municipalities choose to use in these circumstances. We don't have any sort of precedent to follow. And so understanding that this is a very important thing for rebuilding the community, we're suggesting very minimal restrictions and impediments, if you will, to getting the operation moving. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Toss.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One final question, if I may, while I have the floor. It's the last one. I noticed in the external agencies that were consulted that the Country Heritage Committee as well as NNTC were on that list. Can we expect that in all future temporary use permit applications, or what is the rationale to have the KHC involved?
Thank you. That list that you see was the list that we had circulated broadly as our original referral agency list. And so those were, you know, trying to feel our way forward. Those were the agencies we felt we should select from. Now, I'm just going to check with Jack. I don't think we had response from those folks, but it's important. You can see that we sent the referrals to folks on July the 6th, and then the responses were recorded. If we didn't receive a response, we assume that they have no concerns, and we carry on. And that's the way it's defined in our development approval procedures bylaws. So yes, this would happen each time.
And I noticed in that that list of who had been contacted, it did not appear that that went out to the KHC. It does not have July 6th written beside it.
Ooh, okay. Where is that?
Nor Lytton First Nation, nor Siska Indian Band.
I wonder if we have contact information for these groups. If that is the issue, which it may well be, we had identified some groups that we hadn't got all the pieces back together. If anyone is able to provide that contact information, we'll be happy to include them in the referrals in future.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, I do remember that the procedural bylaw that we looked at with those listed names. Are there any other comments or questions from anyone? I don't see none. We have a two-part motion here, recommended motion to bring forward. And who would like to probably read and make this motion?
Mayor O'Connor, if I may, before we read the motion, is it possible to separate the motions insofar as to give us the opportunity as council to vote on the non-enforcement of the second part of that motion?
I'm going to ask Shannon, but I don't think that should be an issue.
That is not a problem, Your Worship.
To make it into two motions, two separate motions. Is that what you're thinking, Councillor Toss?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I don't see why not. So let's do the first one first. So who would like to put forward this first recommended motion?
I will.
Councillor McCann, and a seconder, Councillor Lightfoot. And I'm assuming there's no other further discussion on it. All those in favor?
Aye.
And carried. Thank you. Now we have a second recommended motion here that we just created. Who would like to put that forward? Thank you, Councillor Toss. And a seconder.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. And any comments or questions about this from council? Councillor Toss.
Just to speak in favor of the non-enforcement aspect of it, insofar as that I think an airstrip in this area, it would be short-sighted to think that we might not need that in the future. Demographics and needs wax and wane, and I think an airstrip in this particular part of the valley is indispensable, maybe in 10 years, and I'd hate to see it. I hate to see this covenant disappear. So I'm speaking against it.
I'll just make a comment. If I heard correctly through the report, that if we choose not to remove it, there could be some legal work we would have to do around that. Can I have some clarification on that? I'm not sure who from. Am I correct in understanding that there would then be some legal? Not hearing that correctly.
I think that, in fact, you would not have to do anything, but you would make the conscious decision that you, as the Village of Lytton, would not be enforcing your covenant on that land.
Okay.
It would be simply a case of taking no action, I think, at this point. Shannon, would you agree?
It's a tough one. I mean, you can't fetter a future decision of council to say that council can't change their mind and not take action. So, and enforce it. So it's a tough one. I feel like it's something that I can't give you an ultimate answer today. We'd have to poke in a little bit further. But I mean, if council feels strongly that they would like to leave it on, let's move forward with that, and we'll have to come back to council if there's any major issues.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Lightfoot.
Just a comment, and it's not to say that we did it correctly in the past, but previously there was, at one time, there was a batch plant established on the runway, and Council of the Day did not address it. Subsequently, several years later, another owner established something else that was digging major holes in the runway, and we enlisted our lawyer of the day, who sent the person a letter, and that installation was moved. So I do believe that council has the authority to turn a blind eye. The fact that part of the temporary use permit says that they will restore it as it was, to me, the runway may be reestablished and somewhat usable in the future. So I prefer to turn a blind eye myself, and I'll vote against the motion also.
Thank you. Councillor Michelle or Councillor McCann, do you have any comments?
I think that's basically where I was at, that I'm wondering that we even need this motion. Why do we need it? Because it doesn't sound like anybody wants it anyway. But if we have to all vote against it, we all vote against it.
Will it cause issues for the proponent in bringing in that fund? Like, is it going to cause issues for them? Which in turn is going to cause delays again, because right now getting quotes for concrete for foundations and rebuilding is ridiculously expensive.
Councillor Toss.
Just in response to Councillor Michelle's question, my feeling is that we are the council is about the only entity that could bring that forward as a barrier, from what I'm understanding from Shannon and the team.
Shannon, did you have a comment?
I guess, and feel free to pipe in, Planner Gain, because again, I apologize, but I haven't been super involved in the details in this. But I think the most important point is what Planner Jack had pointed out, that the way it is currently with the covenant on title says that it can solely be used as an airstrip. So we're basically then issuing something that's completely against that. Now, you know, would someone have to take us to task on that? And would anyone be interested in doing that? I have no idea, but you're going against yourselves on this. And I think that is why planning wanted to be discharged. And I sorry, I'm just trying to provide a little clarification. If I'm speaking against planning what you're trying to get forward, please say, but that's the main issue. So you're going to have one thing on title if you leave it saying it can only be used for that use, and you're going to have provided a temporary use permit saying it can be used for an entirely different use. So they're completely contradictory. So it's messy. And, you know, planners and corporate officers don't love messy.
Right. So I just have a quick question. So if we choose to vote against this today, is it something we can consider even before the temporary use permit is up, or sometime in the future, we can consider and bring it back?
This is something I feel like I would need to do more research on. I apologize. I am not an expert on covenants. I am a little bit uncertain on what our mechanisms would be available to us. I don't know if Corey and Jackie have anything else to add on that.
I think because the covenant is in favor of the Village of Lytton, Village of Lytton can reconsider and discharge this covenant at any point, now or in the future. But as I said, the cleanest way is to say, okay, well, we recognize the land is being used for other purposes. There are some issues with having an approved Transport Canada approved airstrip on that land. Maybe this is the moment in time to say, okay, we recognize that while in the case of an emergency, perhaps something will happen there. It's nice flat land, a plane will land. Expectations for using that land in the future for that purpose are tainted by the fact that it's owned by someone else, and you always are going to need the property owner's permission to do whatever it is going to be done there. So it makes us circle back to that place where we can't oblige just because there is a covenant restricting the use. It doesn't mean that we can oblige someone to use it for that use. So it is contrary to the concept of, okay, we need it for this purpose now, but we want to preserve it for that purpose later. It's a difficult conundrum from a legal perspective, and that's why we would prefer that it be discharged. And if it could be reestablished in the future, then, you know, it could come back at some point in the future. I suspect it would look totally different from how it looks now, given the history that we've heard today from Councillor Lightfoot. So unfortunately, I don't think I can say more than that, other than, you know, it's our preference that it be dealt with and we have a nice clean slate.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, I just got cut off. Could you just repeat the last sentence there? Sorry, your tech.
Yeah, it's Corey. That's okay. Yeah, it's okay. We much prefer that a decision was made at this point just to release that now, to clean things up. If in future council wants to consider, or the property owner wants to bring something forward to reestablish that use there, then we can certainly deal with it at that time. But our preference would be to make that conscious decision to release it now. And if it wants to come back in the future, we can deal with it at a future date.
Thank you. Councillor Choss?
Yeah, just reiterating my position. I'm totally not comfortable removing the covenant. Transport Canada will change its, sometimes its requirements depending on need. We can't be sure that the requirements for an airstrip today will be the same as they are in 15 years. Yes, I understand the property owner needs to give permission, but I think that is a really important asset for this area, and I'm not prepared to vote against this. And I do believe it's the prerogative of council to go ahead with choosing not to enforce. So I don't see it as an impediment to the proponent whatsoever. So I'm still will be voting against this.
Thank you. All right, so we have do you have another, you got one more question, or your hand is still up, Councillor Toss?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor here. All those in favor of this second motion? Opposed? And the motion was defeated. Okay, that brings us now to the end of this special meeting. We are going to be moving into closed meeting now, so we need a motion to move into closed meeting. Who would like to make that motion?
Awesome.
Thank you, a seconder. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. So thank you, everyone, for attending, and I'm going to turn it back over to Shannon. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. That concludes the public portion of today's special council meeting. For members of the public, thank you for attending today's meeting, and we ask that you please leave the meeting at this time. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Bye, Ernie.
Bye. And
I'm just going to